We are here again in the wonderful world of Minecraft. At the core, Minecraft is inspired by creation and freedom. The ability to shape your world as your own and overcome many challenges is one that not many games can accomplish. Minecraft is the exception. With its endless possibilities and endless mods, you will never find yourself trying to figure out new things to do, but rather, what new thing will I do this time? Minecraft is not a game that can be stopped after 100 days, and this video is the second in my series. I am proud to be able to make another video and hope you guys will enjoy it as much as I did to make it. Thank you. Day 100 marks the start of the new journey. This first day I decided I wanted to get into Apotheosis and finish everything I could from this mod. To start this, I wanted to get a mega farm going. I found a farm that was really interesting from another YouTuber named Epic Enchants. The video for that is linked in the description if you want to follow along. This day was mostly planning, and I realized I didn't have enough materials for mob crushers, which are the main part of this farm, so I spent some time setting up some fluid extractors to get some materials for these machines. Day 102, I started out with the base of the farm. This only needed basic blocks, so I was able to do this while I was getting the other materials for the machines. I set up the bottom floor for the farm, and this is where all the Endermen will spawn, and they'll get thrown around and crushed by the mob crushers. Day 103, I found this massive group of redstone while I was mining for some materials. This vein of redstone was huge, and I spent nearly all day trying to clear it out. It gave me plenty of materials and allowed me not to worry about redstone anymore because I just had so much of it. Day 104 and 5, I needed some more storage and set up some auto crafting for storage parts. I ended up making a huge upgrade to my storage through this process, and then once I got that, I set up a rubber plant to get materials for those mob crushers I was needing. Day 106, I focused on making myself some vector plates. I was running out of sugar for these, so I found some in my mob farm and explored to get some sugarcane as well. This allowed me to make all the vector plates and place them into my mob crushing layer on my farm. This will move the Endermen around in kind of a spiral, and then they will interact with the mob crushers. Day 107 all the way through 109, I started working on the top layer of the farm where all the materials will be processed. This is where the netherite and diamond armor and tools will be processed into netherite ingots and diamonds. This will also provide me with tons of Apotheosis gems that can be used for enchanting and things. This farm will also provide me with near infinite amounts of XP, so that won't be an issue anymore. Day 110, I started to make myself an enchanting setup using Apotheosis bookshelves. With this mod, you really have to pay attention to the progression to be able to make the right pathway work. I worked on this and then realized to make one of the tiers of bookshelves, I needed some warden tendrils that I didn't have. Day 111, I went down to the deep dark to kill some wardens for those tendrils. Before, when I went down here, it was really dangerous and scary, but this time it was a cakewalk, and I was able to just farm the warden with no issues. I killed them and then headed back up to continue working on the bookshelves. Day 112, I finished my enchanting setup, which makes my enchantments crazy powerful, but they are also pretty unpredictable. Another machine that I could pair with this would be an enchantment extractor where I could pull the enchantments off the tools and then put them in a library from Apotheosis. Using my new enchanting setup, I was able to make myself a library of Alexandria where I would store all of these enchantments. This marked the end of my Apotheosis construction, and this also started the new chapter of finishing my Powah machines. Day 113 through 15, I just went through all the Powah machines and created whatever I was missing from the list. This was pretty uneventful, but it was kind of cool getting through all the progress through the machines. Day 116 through 18 was dedicated to Powah solar panels. I needed a ton of materials to create all the tiers, so I went and got into the mining dimension. Found a huge lapis vein, and this ended up fueling most of my materials that I needed, but then I got back and completely drained my resources to end up making the nitro solar panel. Thankfully this part is done now, so I won't have to completely destroy my resource stockpile anymore. Day 119 was the first day that I moved on to mystical agriculture. This mod has so much potential to feed pretty much my entire storage system. Using seeds for different materials, you can grow essence that makes it so you can create nearly any material with the proper essence. This, combined with harvesting pylons and lily pads of fertility, allows for a really good amount of materials to be made at a reasonable rate. If the farm runs for a while, it should be able to fuel my storage system, and then I will be able to have infinite possibilities with auto crafting. Today, I set up the infusion setup that would be required for many of my crafting recipes in this mod. Day 120, I needed some glowstone, so I went out to the nether to gather some and bring it back. This was needed for part of my farm setup that I will be working on for the next few days. Day 121, I started getting my farm going. To make this more efficient, I needed to get lily pads of fertility, but I needed creeper drops. To get these drops, I'll be using hostile neural networks and the loot fabricator. After getting the glands and making my lily pads, I finished the first layer of the farm and put the lily pads into the farm. Then I set up the second layer to make myself other types of seeds. Day 123 and 24, I created a bunch of new seeds for essence. I finished making all the tier 1 seeds for the farm, and this ended these 2 days. Day 125, I set out to create the best level of jetpack I could make. This was the unobtainium jetpack, and it was really easy to make at this stage in the game for me as I kind of am way ahead. So I had all the materials set up and just did a little auto crafting to make myself the next tier up until I got to unobtainium. This jetpack is insanely fast and makes traveling super easy if I ever need to travel around and explore. Day 126, I started building my layers to my farms for seeds. My plan for this is to have each layer correspond to a certain tier of seeds. For example, the first layer would be tier 1 seeds, and the second would be tier 2, and so on. As well as having the certain tier on each layer, I also added a pure inferium essence layer to each tier. That way I can have some inferium essence to build up into my system. This allowed for a bunch of inferium to be got, as well as getting the tier seeds. Day 127, I continued with the building, and then I had to get myself some soulium for the mob seeds. The mob seeds needed a few different materials than the normal seeds, so that required me going and getting some different blocks from the nether. This kept going for the rest of the day and ended day 127. Day 128, I decided I needed to improve my model frameworks. I got bored of doing the farming, so this is where I ended up. This is kind of off topic from what I had been doing, but it would help me in the future, so I went and did it. To do this, I needed to get the farm animal data models, kill those farm animals to get the simulations to run and get better. I went exploring and found some of these animals and collected their data for the models. Day 129, I worked on my loot fabricators to collect some materials and use those for soul jars. One of the main things I did for this upgrade was I added a crafting upgrade to my exporters, and what this will do is keep prediction matrices loaded into the machines so they can always run and I don't have to keep checking to make sure that there is enough materials. Day 131, I decided I needed to upgrade my storage system. To do this, I needed a ton of materials, so this entire day was dedicated to getting those materials. On day 132, I finally collected the materials and set up the auto crafting to get me a 4096K storage part. This would be a huge improvement to what I currently have and will be vital for the amount of resources I will be getting in the future with some of my machines. Day 133, I went to the end to farm some prosperity shards. These shards are the main resource that I'm running low on right now, so I need to collect as much as possible. Day 134, I still had to get the chicken model completed. I was looking around at different ways that I could accomplish this and found that one way I could do this was by spawning a gateway that would reward me with a bunch of farm animals. I placed this down and finished the gate, getting myself the mobs that I needed and more. Day 135, I started the third layer of my mystical agriculture farm. This layer would be dedicated to the tier 3 seeds that I'm working towards and would help fuel my materials in my storage system. Day 136, I ended up needing more prosperity shards, so I went back to the end to farm for those. And I also needed gold, so day 137, I went and got some gold. Day 138 and 39, I worked on more seeds. My goal was to finish the tier 3 seeds, and as I was going, I was putting them into the layer for the farm and collecting the resources that they gave me. Yet again, I was in need of prosperity shards, so on day 140, I went and farmed for more prosperity. Once I got through the tier 3 seeds, I decided I would put the rest on hold to start up some new machines. I wanted to get into Mekanism to make myself a way to get really good ore processing. To do this, I wanted to build a new layer to my base, so from day 141 through 46, that is what I was doing. Day 147, I went into looking at the Mekanism machines and seeing what I would need and how I would be progressing through the pack. There are tons of resources online for this, but if you guys would like, I could make a video describing this in more detail. Starting day 148, I was looking at getting a tier 3 ore processing factory. To do this, I needed some Mekanism machines and a bunch of time to get these all set up and running. One main machine this would need was a thermal evaporation plant that is now one of the centerpieces of the next floor of my base. This took me a ton of resources and time getting everything set up correctly, but it pays off in the end, allowing me to multiply the amount of ore I can get from one raw material. Day 157 was a more interesting day. This day I spent just looking at the requirements for the ATM Star. One main point that is mentioned is the power generation and storage system. It recommends the max tier storage part as well as a crazy amount of power that I was not achieving at all at this point yet. So that kind of gave me a great thing to look at and start working for. Once I looked through the star requirements, it was brought up that I needed a ton more materials, and to do this, I wanted to set up a chunk destroyer. I got all the materials for the chunk destroyer and I created it all day 158. Day 159, I made some ender chests and an ender gate to supply my chunk destroyer with power and a way to store items. I set up my chunk destroyer with all the necessary setup, and man, this thing, it is insane. It does exactly what the name says and completely destroys entire chunks with ease. This would be a great time for me to be able to fill up my storage with plenty of ores and materials that I would be needing, and a lot more than I actually need of certain things like endstone, which I am going to need to completely take out of my storage system. The next setup, I wanted to try and do some nuclear reactors from Mekanism. This ended up being a horrible mistake, and you'll see why soon. I got everything set up to try and make all the different materials I needed, and I set up all the auto crafting for this as well. Once everything was set up, I started up the reactor and let it pump some power into my system. I left for like 2 seconds and came back to see the stupid reactor had exploded. I don't know exactly what happened, but I suspect it had something to do with the cooling. I decided it wasn't worth rebuilding, so I moved on and put everything back into my storage. Day 169, I had to move my chunk destroyer because it had fully mined out all the chunks in its radius. I moved it and set it to mine a huge number of chunks this time, so hopefully it won't stop anytime soon. Day 170 through 72, I worked on getting my reactors set up with auto crafting and getting new ones made. I ended up getting a total of 4 reactors, getting me around 1 million RF per tick. These reactors were from the Powah mod, and if you haven't seen, we completed all of this stuff earlier and we were just taking that. Once my power could be maintaining everything that I was running, I set out to work on my mystical agriculture tier 4 seeds. This process went really fast and only ended up taking 1 day, and I got all the seeds that I thought were necessary. Once the seeds and chunk destroyer were fully running, I realized I needed a ton more storage. On day 174, I set out to make an even bigger storage part, and this was limited by my resources. I mined a ton and got everything I needed, then I crafted my new crazy storage part with my auto crafting. Day 175, I completed the tier 5 seeds. I actually didn't complete all of them, but some of them were a little bit more difficult to craft, so I just let it sit where it was and it started filling up my inventory. Day 176, I set myself a new goal. I was going to get into the awesome Productive Bees mod. This mod is a great one to get a ton of resources passively and would be something I would need in the near future. This mod focuses a lot on finding the starting bees and then breeding them in certain combinations to make better bees that can then be bred again. This is one that is harder to show you how to do, and if you want to get into it, the quest book walks you through pretty good, as well as many resources online will help you. To get started in this mod, it's really important to get some honey. The first thing I did was hunt down some beehives and got some honey. Then I made some honey seeds from mystical agriculture, adding them to my farm so I wouldn't have to constantly camp the beehives, and this would provide me with the honeycombs and honey that I needed. Day 179 through 181, I built a cozy little bee hut for all my bees to chill in. This isn't the most pretty build they could have done, but I'm pretty proud of it. Day 182, I spent putting some beehives in boxes and just overall getting the bee hut ready to go. This proved to be pretty easy with some bee villagers I made, and I was ready for some bees. Day 183, I got myself a redstone bee. Each bee has its own requirements to get, and some can vary with the difficulty. The redstone bee is one of the starter bees that you need to breed the bees into all the different combinations, which are all over in the wiki and also explained pretty well within all the mods quest book. I also took some solitary bees, which are the ones that don't need to roam, and I just put them into a chest so they wouldn't be cluttering up inside this bee hut as I get more. The next bee I pursued was the blue banded bee. On day 184, I figured out what I needed for the blue banded bee and then pursued the capture of this bee. To get this bee, I needed an acacia nest and then some honey treats, which I got and set down. Once this was set up, I used the honey treats on the nest and then the bee spawned. This nest had a 100% chance of spawning this bee, so it was mostly just prepping the honey treats that took time. Once I caught the bee, I put him into the chest for safekeeping. Day 185 was a more fun day. I went into the end, and my goal was to spawn the ender bee. This bee is one that took much longer to acquire and figure out where it went after it said that it spawned. So during that time, when I was waiting for the stupid bee, I decided to spawn the ender dragon again and see how easy it would be to kill it. It turns out that it was extremely easy with all the gear and prepping that I have done all the way up to this point, and really there was no struggle involved in it. Day 186, I was working more on my bees. I did a little bit with the bee hut, I guess, and then I just kind of added more bees into the hut for now, and with the goal of getting kind of every bee set up and ready in the future. One of the main goals in the pack is to eventually make extremely good tools with the alloys of all the mod's ores. From day 187 to 89, I spent the time setting up the tools to create alloys. One of the biggest problems for this was the power required when combining the specific materials, and this is the main issue that was run into since I already had all the materials made and figured out. The materials just had to be put into the Powah system to combine them, and then taking the time to upgrade them into the alloyed ingots. Once the ingots are made, they can be combined into a little altar very similar to the mystical agriculture seed maker, and this is how you make the tools. Day 190, I pursued the alloy sword. To make the sword, I needed 3 of each of the alloys that you can make in the mod. After creating all of these ingots, I also needed to have all the altars set up, which I did earlier, and then lastly, I need an Allthemodium sword. After everything was crafted, I needed some magical power from Ars Nouveau, which I got from all the mystical agriculture plants growing, and just applying that magical power. This started the process of the sword being crafted, and that was what I did on 190. Day 191 and 2 was spent crafting the alloy pickaxe. This was basically the same process as the sword, but just took a little more time to get all the materials built up and put into the Ars enchanting apparatus. After this was created, now I have 2 really insane tools that will be my endgame options. Day 193, I worked on making my tools enchanted. At this stage, there are a few enchantments that are completely useless to me since the tools I have been using are unbreakable. With the tools being unbreakable, mending and unbreaking are completely useless and no longer need to be put onto anything. My sword only needs looting, sharpness, and if I want knockback or fire aspect, I can put that too. My pickaxe could use fortune, efficiency, and that's it. This makes my tools much easier to enchant, and this did not take long with my enchantment library. And this is what ended day 193. After the enchanting, I got bored again and started working on bees. During day 194, I pursued the diamond bee. This bee needed to be bred by putting the lapis bee and the ender bee together into the breeding chamber. This gave me the diamond bee, which would be useful later on. Day 195, I was still working on the bees. I haven't used the bee combs yet for anything, so I haven't really been utilizing the bees for what they are good for. This is something that I will have to address in the next 100 days if you guys are interested in seeing another one, but for now, I worked on some more bees. I got myself an enderite bee and a wither bee. The wither bee was super easy, all I had to do was feed a wither rose to the skeletal bee, and this made the wither bee. The enderite bee was more complicated and needed to be made by breeding. Day 196, we are approaching the end, and there is still much to do. There isn't a lot of time left, and definitely not enough to finish the bees, so I made the last bee I wanted and made the vibranium bee. This bee was done by breeding again, and then was added to the bee cage. Then, after this bee, I wanted to go to the Twilight Forest to finish out this mod pack. This dimension is massive and has so many new mobs and bosses to fight. This dimension is one that should be done a little earlier than I am, but since I'm so far into the pack, I am able to beat the bosses with ease. So it will be more exploring and learning how to go through the puzzles than anything. Day 197 was the first boss besides the Naga. I had already gone into the Twilight Forest and killed the Naga previously, but I hadn't progressed much besides that. This boss was the Lich, and it took me forever to explore enough to find the biome. I needed to get a magic map that would show me the biomes, and then after making this map, I was able to find the Lich Tower. I climbed the tower and went straight to the boss. This boss had a specific mechanic where you have to hit the correct Lich with the fireballs it shoots at you, but I just brute forced it and just kept hitting it until it died since I couldn't take any damage. After this, I went into the labyrinth that has the Minoshroom. This is basically a typical labyrinth where I need to navigate to the bottom floor and then find the room where the Minoshroom is located and kill it. This was another really easy to kill boss and provided pretty much no worries to me. Day 198, I spent almost the entire time stuck trying to figure out how to kill the Hydra. There was this yellow film around the Hydra, but I could go through it. I thought this was just some sort of mistake, so I kept going and hitting the Hydra, and I caused it to get a bunch more heads before I realized I needed to eat the stew that I picked up from the labyrinth, and then I would be able to hurt the Hydra. I drank the stew, and then the fight was easy peasy. I took no time to kill the Hydra, and this was the final boss I would deal with for these 100 days. Day 199, I went back home to tend to the house. I went to the bee shack and tended to the bees, and then wandered around the base thinking about what the next 100 days could hold for me. Each time I play Minecraft, there are so many things to do, and thinking up what to do can take so much time, but it is so rewarding. When a creation comes to light, it can be so cool and awesome, and even though I'm not a great builder, I still enjoy making things and trying my best. The last day of the 200-day video is finally here. Over the many hours that I have put into the series, there are so many more things that I can think of that I still need to do. Every day held a new experience, and never did it become boring. Every time I play the game, I remember why it's so good and why I always feel like I want to keep playing. The game of Minecraft is one that will always be there for me and will always fill the time for me with something special, no matter what. With creativity at the heart of the game, playing Minecraft isn't just playing video games. It's developing your creative abilities and making new innovations and creating whatever you feel like creating. No matter what you build, if it brings you happiness, that is the greatest gift a game can give you. We have reached the end of this video, and I want to give a huge thanks to anyone who is here watching this. To the many people here, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to make these videos, and also thank you personally for being here at the end. You made it the whole way, and you are the reason that I am able to do this. I love every one of you that is here, and could never express how happy it makes me to share this with you. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and don't forget to like and subscribe.